Y'all doing today? So I'm Greg Schwenk. I'm the CEO. Hey, good morning. So I'm Greg Schwenk. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Newport Beach Film Festival, and it's my distinct honor to welcome you to the 20th annual Newport Beach Seminar Program. When we founded the festival 20 years ago, one of the hallmarks that we had was to always offer as much interactivity as possible during the festival. Because if you think about it, if you think about the movies, it's a fairly passive experience in that you go and you sit in a darkened room and you see something amazing, and then maybe you'll go off and talk to someone, a friend, a family, or someone like that you'll be able to engage with. But what makes film festivals special, and especially the Newport Beach special, are the opportunities to meet and engage with the people both in front of and behind the camera. And when we founded the festival, we always wanted to celebrate especially those men and women behind the camera. And I just want to give you a little bit of a background before I hand it off to my colleague Lahani to talk to you more about the seminars. When we started the festival, we really had a deep interest in cinematography. Early on, we began working with a number of legendary cinematographers, both Vilmos Zsigmond and Laszlo Kovacs. If you don't know who they are, you got to go onto IMDb and look them up, and then go watch their great movies. But they were legends as far as camera work. And Laszlo became a patron of the festival. And for the remainder of his life, every year he would come out to the festival, meet with students, engage with cinematographers and cinematographers to be, and we really like to continue and build that relationship and that tradition going forward into the next 20 years of the festival. Well, you fast forward a few years, and luckily our friendship and relationship with Variety and the great forethought of Steve Gatos and others on the team at Variety allowed us to bring on board the 10 cinematographers to watch. And we think this is a very lasting tribute to all the cinematographers that have worked with us throughout the 2 decades. And it's been really a very special opportunity to meet some men and women who are doing extraordinary things behind the camera. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the support of the City Council. Their continued and steadfast support of the festival makes it possible, but also to the Arts Commission of Newport Beach, which makes this free. If you go to other major festivals around the world, this would be a fairly expensive ticket for you to attend and participate with. And because of the Arts Commission and their support of what we do, we allow this to be a free opportunity for you and your colleagues to come in and enjoy the festival and the wit and witticism and insight of the people you're about to see today. A couple of quick little housekeeping things. We've got a ton of great seminars today and tomorrow, so please tell your friends and family to come on out and enjoy. We've got an incredible special workshop with Zeiss at 2 o'clock today. So if you want to know more about the amazing lenses and the technology behind the films that are being made today, Zeiss is going to give you some really cool insights to that. And that's going to be at the Friends of the Library room just down the way at the Newport Beach Public Library. With that, I'd like to say thank you for all of you for coming out and participating in our 20th annual celebration of cinema. I'd like to bring up Lahani Cook. Big round of applause for Lahani. It takes a massive team of people to put the festival together, and Lahani and her team are the ones that outreach to many of our speakers and to many of our honorees and dignitaries that come out and give of their time and talent. And Lahani does this from a volunteer position and one that is done because of the passion for our community and for the respect of the people we are working with and for the opportunity that you have. So thank you very, very much, Lahani, and thank you for your team. With that, I'll turn over to Lahani, and we'll start today. Thank you, guys.
As Greg mentioned, I'm so happy to have you guys here and join us for the 20th annual Newport Beach Film Festival. I'm excited that you guys are here for seminars. These are free and open to the public, like he mentioned. We have great panels scheduled for this whole entire weekend, including a wonderful workshop with Zeiss. And if you guys want to get up close and personal with the camera, learn a little bit more, get familiar with it, they're going to do that later today at 2 p.m. at the Friends of the Library room. So I'm going to plug that just enough to make sure you guys head over there. We have great panels for tomorrow with Disney animation and a wonderful women in film, music in film, and editing with some icons that we're having this year for the festival. So, and screenwriting later today at 3:30. So really hope to see you guys there. And yeah, thank you so much for coming and joining us. We're so happy to have you guys here. We do this for you guys to have these resources available. And I'd like to turn this over to Zeiss to come and take over and give a little introduction. Thanks.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? Good? Ready to learn something? Wonderful. Zeiss is very proud to sponsor such an amazing event. My name is Snehal Patel, and I'm the cinema sales manager for North and South America. I travel around to a lot of cities. I go to a lot of film festivals and work with many filmmakers. In fact, some of the people speaking today we've worked with before. But what I really like about the Newport Beach Film Festival is that it's very open to educating the community. And also, it's very supportive of filmmakers. And plus, they really do throw the best parties. So you're not missing out by not going anywhere else this year. This is a great film festival to be at. This is one of my favorite programs throughout the year. I think Variety does a wonderful job highlighting a diverse number of cinematographers doing all kinds of great work that you already are watching. I mean, you're watching their shows, you're watching their movies, and now you get to hear up close and personal how they feel. So there's it's a two-part program with, the cinematographers from the magazine, the first part, and then a special cinematographer in the second part. I think you're going to learn a lot today and have a lot of fun. I'll be around afterwards if anyone wants to come up and get a free lens wipe for their sunglasses, binoculars, or camera lenses and chat a little bit about filmmaking. I'm here to help you out, so let me know. And thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Karanikas. I'm with Variety, and myself and my colleague Steve Gaitos have put this program together for the last few years, and we're very proud of it. Our 10 cinematographers to watch, we have 6 in the room, and I'll call them up. So bear with me. I'd just like to say that we've done this for 10 years, so now we have 120 cinematographers to watch altogether, which is quite a great number. And in the past, we've had Claudia Miranda, who did The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Life of Pi. We've had Hoyt van Hoytema, who did Dunkirk, and Greg Fraser, who did Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. It's a great list. So this group this year includes 10 DPs who've shot across all genres, music videos, documentaries, television, theatrical films, and they're the members of the 2019 class. So I'll call them up one by one. I'll do it alphabetically. Christopher Aoun, who grew up in Beirut, went to film school in Munich, and was behind the imagery of Lebanon's foreign language entry Capernaum, the story of a streetwise child who flees his negligent parents and survives through his wits on the streets. Christopher? You can have the seat. Eric Branco. Eric shot Clemency, the winner of the Sundance Dramatic Competition, the Grand Prize jury. He went to New York's School of Visual Arts. Clemency centers on a prison warden who carries out death row executions and confronts the psychological consequences. Eric? Jessica Lee Gagné is from Quebec. She was a DP on Ben Stiller's fact-based limited series for Showtime, Escape at Dannemora. Jessica studied cinematography at Concordia University in Montreal. And this is another prison drama. It's a true story of a prison escape of two convicted murderers with the help of a female prison employee. Nick Matthews was born in the UK. He's of mixed Indian and English ancestry, and he was raised in Australia, where he went to film school. He lends Hotel Mumbai a retelling of the 2008 terrorist siege of the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. Nick. Matt Mitchell is from Connecticut, and he shot the Nia DaCosta's Little Woods, which is a bleak thriller about drug dealing in the Midwest. He studied at NYU and in Prague. And last but not least, Kugan Tran. Q moved from New York to LA after experiencing the events of 9/11 a bit too close for comfort. She studied film at UCLA and shot the HBO comedy series Camping, created by Lena Dunham and Jenny Connor, that tells the story of an outdoor trip that's derailed by uninvited guests and the forces of nature. And I'd like to very quickly acknowledge 4 DPs who could not make it because they're busy, as DPs tend to be. Galo Olivares, he's from Mexico, and he collaborated with Alfonso Cuarón on Roma as a camera operator and cinematography collaborator. That film, of course, went on to win the Oscar for Best Cinematography. Benjamin Loeb, born in Kenya, raised in Norway, this is a very international crowd, who shot the revenge thriller Mandy. Eric Messerschmidt, he was a DP on the Netflix show, the crime drama Mindhunter. And Mathieu Plainfossé, a native of France, who shot Ty Roberts' The Iron Orchard. So that's our lineup. And I'd like to start by, I guess I'll sit down, probably more convenient. Is this on? On? Hello? On, okay. I'd like to ask each of you, why are you a DP? We'll start at the end with Christopher.
I never thought about it.
What attracted you to cinematography?
The fact of diving in different realities and just being able to be super close to people the way you couldn't without a camera.
So it's the people factor, and it's not the technology, it's people?
No, yeah, the people.
Okay. I can't see who's next to him.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, I think for me, it's about storytelling, and I think cinematography is probably the purest form of visual storytelling that you can do on set.
Jessica?
Do I have to turn it on? Hello? Okay. I really don't know. Wait, is it working? Okay, I got it. I think what I would say is I was always really naturally drawn to cameras. It was just something that happened really instinctively, and I really like creating spaces. And I really love creating spaces and moods and environments, and as a cinematographer, you get to work with directors and production designers to kind of create these environments.
Mm-hmm.
Go. Yeah, I think I'm kind of a reluctant DP in a sense. I think in the sense that I'm not a particularly technological person or someone who was particularly interested specifically in the sort of machinery of filmmaking, but I think I sort of learnt it because I had such a passion for storytelling, and it just sort of just kind of happened. Yeah.
Echoing pretty much what everybody said here, I think definitely the human aspect of it is something that I constantly keep going back to, but in addition to that, I think I've always been a visual learner, and images to me have always been something that speak to me sometimes more directly than words or other, art forms. So to me, the image was why I was drawn to, and obviously that's directly tied to being a cinematographer on set.
Growing up, I spoke Vietnamese with my family who were refugees from Vietnam, and so I remember very fondly just watching shows like I Love Lucy, and the fact that just images can transcend culture and language. And so for me, it's more about the emotional response I get from watching movies, and I wanted to share that experience, just having that kind of the joy of just watching stuff and loving it. So for me, it's much more emotional. So I want to impart that.
Yeah. Cinematography, like all film crafts, is a very collaborative experience and endeavor. All of you work with directors. The director obviously is the lead on the movie. Can you describe what the conversation is like when you meet a director for the first time? What do you talk about? Anybody want to start with that question? You don't all have to answer, but whoever wants to.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think part of being a DP is being open and aware of kind of the director's like emotional comfort zone. And so I think the first meeting is really about seeing if your kind of emotional space and intellectual space and artistic space, if those, if you can find an overlap there. I feel like that's really what the first meeting for me is about. It's about, we're usually not talking about the film in great detail. We're usually kind of just feeling each other out and, trying to see if this is somebody I want to, see more than my family for the next however long.
Anybody else want to talk about that?
I always ask the director about the script and the story and make sure that we are on the same page so that I can then do justice to the script. So I go through I'm shooting a movie right now. I just was shooting till 6 a.m., so I apologize for acting like a zombie. But so we'll go through the beats of the script and make sure that we're on the same page. And then we talk about the visuals. But first of all, we just break down the narrative.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's usually in subsequent meetings or conversations where you get specific about the visual language of that particular film. I'm always curious if the director and I see eye to eye on why we're telling that story, or I usually ask, why is this a film that's important to you, or why is this a film as opposed to, it could be a play or it could be a book or something. So, what makes this story unique to you? And usually when I can understand what the director is looking for out of that film, it helps inform me what they're looking for, which is obviously my job then is to visually be able to get them there. So it's more about broader strokes, and then equal to what Eric said, determining if you're just going to be like simpatico on set, or what the vibe is and the energy, and if you guys can find common ground that doesn't necessarily have to be anything visually related.
In terms of procedure and pre-production, do all of you storyboard, and what do you think of the storyboarding process?
You get a mic that works. No, I think. With regards to the storyboarding, I think as a cinematographer, you have to be open to and to not storyboard. That's one thing I think, like part of even in early meetings with directors, talking about the approach. The story is obviously a key and super important part of it, but I also like to talk about how to approach and how to prep with a director, and to make sure that you're on the same page in that sense is also really important. So I think as a cinematographer, you do have to kind of put yourself second and see what the director, if you think they're a fit for you, to listen and see if they want to or if they don't need to, because there's something amazing from not storyboarding that can come up, and there's also great things that can happen with storyboarding. But I feel like you always have to, even if you do board a story on set, be ready to go with what's actually happening while you're shooting. Which
so
might
improvise.
Yeah, always being ready to improvise, I think, is really important.
I 100% agree. It's a nice platform to start from, but knowing if you see something on set that's really interesting and creative, to then deviate from the boards and to go from there. I also think from a television versus feature versus documentary perspective, storyboards are really, really helpful in making the days when you have stunts, for example, or you have VFX. So it's really important to storyboard those sequences. So I think having an overall visual strategy is, of course, important to design the arc of the film. But then when you have more technical aspects, I think storyboarding really, really comes into play.
Do you discuss technology with the director at all, or does that come later in the process? Like what kind of camera, that kind of stuff? Christopher?
Yeah, I think it's a first. Like if we talk about texture or finding the look of the film, then it's about finding the right lenses and technique for me. But then there's a moment where I really like to forget about technology and about cameras and not talk about it with my director. And that's for me when things start to be more interesting, when it gets, when we leave technology to create something and do some kind of poesy, like poetry.
Poetry. Okay. What about operating the camera? Some cinematographers like to be their own camera operators. Others prefer to hire somebody to do that, while they tend to more general things like the set and lighting and all that kind of stuff. How do you guys feel about that?
I was just going to say, it's an interesting one when you don't grow up in the American system, because here in the union system you're not really allowed to touch the camera, and it's quite a confronting moment, I suppose, when in a sense you get to that point when you sort of have the opportunity to work at a certain scale that you might not have worked at as you were growing up. I find that sort of lack of intimacy really odd, where I'm not sort of directly with the cast, and I find that sort of puts me at a distance. But I think there's a certain kind of industrial filmmaking where it's absolutely fantastic, where you really do just oversee the process, and you get to sit with the director all day long, which can be really helpful in the planning, to talk about tomorrow a bit and talk about this afternoon and all that. But actually I miss, I don't know about the other guys, but I really miss being eye to eye, and it's a bit of a cliche, but that idea that you're sort of dancing with the cast when you're operating the camera, I miss that dance sometimes.
Christopher?
And yeah, there's different kind of awareness also, or relationship when I operate myself, but then a lot of times I have someone who I give the camera to create a distance between what I'm seeing through the camera and what I would see as a spectator, like and this is something very interesting about how to be in a scene and in a psychology of a person and then create that distance. So it's kind of interesting to try to get someone sometimes to take over, but I wouldn't, I'm used to the European system where I operate myself, and I love that.
I operate all my features, but when in television you have to sit back and deal with a lot more than just actors. You're dealing with studios and networks, and you have multiple cameras, so it's nearly impossible to operate for television. And I've been shooting television for the last 2 years. So I wrapped my last show in November, and since then I've been doing commercials and this feature. So it's been really interesting getting back in the saddle, but I really missed it, I realized, operating.
Yeah. Just a final thought on it. I mean, I come from documentaries where obviously you're usually a very small crew and you're operating. So I've done films where I've had to have an operator, and while that was a very large challenge, I'll say the plus side to why you might want an operator, why it can be a good thing, is I get to focus, like Nick said, I can be closer with the director, but also depending on the type of movie or the scale of movie, you can focus more on the lighting, which might be something that's paramount compared to the camera work. But I do still come from and love to operate, and I've found the balance is that when I have to have an operator, Operators can also be really amazing artists themselves, and they can present ideas and show you and do things. It's a really hard job, so sometimes it's actually really nice to have somebody you can trust and you can just have to help you get something or create something that maybe you weren't focusing on because of the other hats you're wearing. But I find that if it's a handheld shot, I always operate, and when it's more composed or something else, I find that's when it's easier to let somebody else take the wheels, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say the same thing. I always do my own handheld. I feel like that, it's also, operating is one of those things where you also need to really feel out the director and what they want. There are scenes and there are directors, and even within a movie there will be scenes where they'll want to be at Video Village watching monitors and having kind of an overview of what's happening, and then there are scenes where they want to be in the room with like a little handheld wireless monitor. And on those scenes, I want to be in the room. I want to be, you get different things when you are 3 feet from the actor and you're feeling their energy and they're feeling your energy, and you know what I mean? And it is a very, there are unspoken things happening that you wouldn't be able to feel if you were at a monitor.
It's one step less removed. The communication can be like a little simpler if you're just making those decisions.
Yeah, and you can also just try things out because they're in front of you, which
Talking about operating, we're all apparently very passionate about this.
I'm holding back.
Well, it's a major deal on sets, obviously. Q, you mentioned commercials. Many of you have done commercials and music videos. What do you learn from the short form experience so that you can later apply to long form film or television? What is it that commercials bring to your craft or your art?
I think you can take a lot more chances in commercials. I don't want to say there's less stakes involved, but I think that studios and feature-length films are a little more hesitant in allowing you to really, really experiment the whole way through. I mean, there can be vignettes within a film where you can do some interesting things, but a commercial is usually like between 1 and 5 days, 1 and 10 days. So you can really, it's more about the visuals, so you can really go crazy with that.
Mm-hmm. Jessica?
For some reason, for me, it's the opposite. I'm actually horrible at shooting commercials. We were just talking about this. Like, it's just bad. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but working on it. I take so many risks in fiction. Like, I've been in bad situations also where I've gone too far. But I feel like that's kind of defined my work also. I'm not able to do that. I wish I was in commercials because maybe my work would be better. So I don't know why it's like the opposite for me.
Interesting. What about the rest of you? Commercials, music videos, that whole background?
I think short films, you did mention short films, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, short films are sort of the place where, I mean, I look back now at even short films when I first started a long time ago, and there's still things that I really like, and those films were made with passion, and they were made without 12 producers around the video split, watching, and so there was an immediacy and a creativity about the process, that how they were made. And I think I'm sort of with Jess that on the commercial side, that I just find that it's not really a risk taking space so much. You're kind of selling a product. I suppose it depends, what scale of commercials you're doing, but certainly short films, I think, are where you really get to define yourself, because so often when you're shooting, when you do get to do, I suppose, commercial work, it's very often, let's face it, you're shooting a lot of shot, reverse shot. There's a lot of talking goes on in stories, whereas in short films, there's a lot of risks that are taken, and so those shots kind of can stay with you for a long time, I think. Stay with your show reel, I mean.
I need to ask the perennial question, film versus digital. Are there any of you on this panel who have not shot a lot of film? This would have been an unthinkable question a few years ago, but now as a new generation is coming up, I think there's a lot of people who are mostly exposed to digital and not film. Who has anything to say about that?
I know for me, and I'm assuming maybe a lot of the people on this panel, but I was in a weird place because I learned on film, I studied film, everything was film, and then when I graduated, that camera over there, or a version of that camera over there, was released, and it just went like, obviously out the window. So it's a weird thing where I know film, I shoot film, I came from film, but definitely there was a gap, and I think it took a long time for the digital world to sort of catch up a bit. But there definitely is a resurgence of film. I've shot more film in the last year than I have in 10 years. So I think that that's an encouraging sign. I love film. It's definitely a different medium. I think the best way to think about it is that you can have your kind of like purist or non-purist way, but they're different things, and if you just know them and treat them as such and can get the best out of what that tool, it's just a tool. But I do think that there is like a generation probably of younger cinematographers and directors. I find it's harder to sell a director on shooting film now if they've never done it. I think that's harder than finding DPs who haven't shot it. I've found a number of younger directors I've been wanting to work with and trying to push them to shoot on film and on their shorts or on passion projects so they can experience it, and it's really hard because they have no grasp of it and they're very nervous about it, and that's, I think, the biggest loss I've found is actually working with directors that have never shot on film before.
Yeah, I'm probably about 5 years too late for film as a DP. I again learned on film, studied film in school, hardly shot any digital, and then after school I worked as a gaffer in the lighting department. And those jobs were almost all film. And it wasn't until kind of the tail end of my gaffing where we started getting digital jobs. And then, obviously, then when I started shooting, it was all cheaper digital, very small, stuff with no money. That was all digital. And again, yeah, like Matt said, there is kind of a resurgence in film, I think, among people that are like, wait, this was the standard for so many years. Let's go back. Let's try this again. Something I will say, which, I've said a lot recently, is that I think as a crew member, I found digital very empowering, and I learned a lot more on digital shows than I did on film shows because I could see in real time what the director of photography was doing in a way that I couldn't see when we were shooting film. The film taps were kind of like these, 8-inch tube TV, black and white taps, and you can get a sense of framing and everything, but not exposure, not really the nuance of what was happening. And once when I was gaffing digital shows, I was with DPs who were, at the, top of their game. They're masters of the craft, and they're seeing things that I'm not seeing. And being able to see their choices and what they're doing to the image in real time, I think was very helpful to me in my journey, and as a student of film.
I've also been in the opposite situation of having to convince directors to not shoot film, which sounds horrible. But sometimes, you, as a cinematographer on a bigger scaled project, you have to be really smart about attacking a project in a way that you can make it achievable. If you're working with someone who's insanely ambitious, you have to also become their right hand in making sure that what they want to do is possible. On the Dan Amora show, on my first meeting with Ben, the director, he's like, I really want to shoot this on film. It's his first TV show, my first TV show. And I'm like, I think that's a bad idea. I straight up told him. And thinking back about how we did Dan Amora, it would have been completely impossible to do that show the way we did, and he would have had maybe half the shots that we had.
Why is that?
Because we were shooting all the time. One of the scenes that we did in what they call the North Yard in the show, which is it's a prison show, and there's this backyard space that's kind of crazy, which is in the real prison. We had one day in the winter and one day in the summer in there. And the day in the summer, we shot 48 hours worth of footage in 8 hours, because we had basically cameras rolling nonstop and slow motion and everything. He would not have had those shots. So he would have whole scenes and things that would just not have been there to tell the story. So sometimes
the sheer volume of footage.
Yeah, and I think if you have a director that's really, I'm not saying he's not prepared. I think that show, it would have been impossible to be prepared for it in the time that we had. But I've worked with other directors. I've shot 2 features on film also, so I've been in that world also. But with directors that had a more of a shot list approach, or were a little bit more organized in that sense and had the time to prepare their movie and chose where they wanted to go and be a little freer. But I think when you're working on something where you're not sure what you're getting into and it can get ginormous, like it's not a 1.5 hour film, it's a 8-hour series, then it gets really hard. So sometimes as a cinematographer, you have it's not unfortunate, but it's kind of like you have to be, you can't always promise directors things that they can't. They don't always understand the technical implications of things, so you have to be a little bit like, you have to be truthful and watch out for those things, because you can get really excited about it, but you have to know what the consequences are.
Did you want to say something?
I was going to piggyback on the technology side of it, what Eric was mentioning about really understanding the digital format and playing with it. Last night, for example, I was shooting a sequence and I opened up the shutter to 360 degrees, and I wouldn't have been able to do it on film given the lighting and the resources, and then I also like over cranked to 96, and that's something you can do pretty easily in the digital format and see the results and play it back. And I think like taking advantage of understanding the digital format is really important these days.
All of you are artists as cinematographers, and you care a lot about how your image is going to turn out. How involved do you get, or how involved do you want to be in the post-production and the DI process where the final look of the image is created? You're smiling.
Everybody on this panel is thinking of the political answer to this. I guess since I opened my big mouth, you want to be as involved as possible, obviously. You know, this might tie in, not to go back to the film thing, but the one thing about, you know, when you, to make the counter argument to Eric, like when you shot on film, I mean, you really had the ability to control that image, because really only you saw it and kind of knew the magic that you were making. And so there in some ways, not that you had more control, but it really was, you know, it was really about, you know, how you're exposing it and lighting and shooting it, and it was a little closer, hopefully, to what you finally did. Now, you know, everybody right there on the set can see what you're doing, can make, you know, comments or notes, or you can change things, and it just gets harder and harder every day to, as a cinematographer, to work with your creative team and your directors and come up with an idea for how your images should be feeling or looking, when you can very easily, or other departments or people have the ability to just change them, and you really don't have you have a lot less control, even though a lot of times people think you have more control now because you can, but I think it gets trickier and trickier, and you know, in post, obviously schedules are tricky, and you want to be there. A lot of times we have other projects we're on, or it doesn't line up, but it can be very daunting knowing that your ideas cannot always be seen all the way through. And so I think that's one of the hardest parts about shooting digitally these days as a cinematographer, is trying to keep the image control as streamlined as possible through the entire pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I work really closely with my DIT in creating a really strong look on set. So I'll have the CDL, the color decision list, and I'll try to bake in as much of the look as possible, of course, knowing that you're still shooting on the area log C, for example, but working with the DIT and just creating a very, very strong look as you create is kind of like shooting film and doing bleach bypass, or, you know, pushing 2 stops. So we're doing that even knowing that the editors are cutting with these dailies that have the CDL on it. And so then editors get used to seeing that, and the producers get used to seeing that. So like in the final DI, if you do push the look a different way, they're like, oh, we kind of liked it in the dailies. So it's helpful to have a DIT and to be able to create a very strong CDL.
I'll jump in. I mean, basically what it boils down to, I'll give this somewhat non-political answer. What it boils down to is that I think a lot of times, you know, producers or the powers that be think that the DP's job ends when the movie wraps, and they're not interested in working with schedule or paying you for your time to come to the DI and that kind of thing. And so that's just the reality of the situation. So until that changes, like you said, you know, it becomes about being as intentional as you can be on set knowing that you might not be there later, and making sure that people don't, if you can have the editors looking at what the editors and the director and everyone looking at what the movie you want it to look like, you're in a better position, because if they're not looking at that, you're never going to get back to that. They're going to fall in love. They're going to have, Stockholm syndrome with looking at a very, just Rec 709, just a very basic kind of image transform, which does not have really any artistry to it.
I think the best way around that is, obviously you want to do as much of the look in camera, which we're talking about, but I think I found that, going back to like your initial conversations when you're meeting a director or producers, whatever, is to be very upfront, very early about what your role is and how you'd like it to be, and just to be very honest and try and find people that you can collaborate with that understand or appreciate that. It doesn't always work out, but I think it comes down to finding good people that understand that need and desire, and that this is an important part of the process. And like Eric said, it doesn't end at the end of just production. And so it's that I've found is the best way to sort of avoid the really crappy other end of it, which is to just try and find people that understand and respect your role, and then vice versa, you respecting theirs, and just try and bring it up as early as possible and continually remind and gingerly, keep the conversation going so there are no surprises.
Mm-hmm. Let me push it in a more political direction again. Do you think that cinematographers should be compensated for getting involved in post-production work, and should the agents be supporting them in that direction?
They do. I mean, I make sure now that color timing is in my contract without fail. And actually, I just dropped a project that said they weren't interested in that, and I walked away from it. Because
is it always possible to get that in contracts?
No. I mean, to give you a really interesting example, I had an email yesterday from a director who I just worked with on a picture, and he said that he'd just received an email from a producer saying on this picture that we wrapped on, that how excited that producer was to do color timing with him. And this director wrote to me and said, help, I'm really scared. And, that's the kind of dynamic that you get in commercials, which, okay, is, a little more kind of normal in that world. But a big creative artistic endeavor like a movie, to have people just kind of with that mentality, it's frightening for directors and it's frightening for DPs, I think. Certainly was for me when I saw that. But yeah, from my point of view, I always have it contracted now. At least you sometimes don't get a couple of weeks, but you at least will get a week, and then perhaps you do the rest remotely. That's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, same. I also walked away from a project last year. I mean, sometimes these early conversations about color and your involvement in color are sometimes about that, and they're sometimes about how do these people that I'm about to work with view me as a craft person, as an artist. And if I'm saying that this is important to me, and they're still saying no, they might not be someone that I want to work with.
I want to open it to questions from the audience in a few minutes, but I'd like to ask you about the future of your profession first. The job of the cinematographer is evolving. DPs are very often now consulting on animated movies, advising on lighting and other manners. They also help out with the visual effects. How do you see the job of the DP changing over the next decade or so? And you might want to discuss other technologies as well, like VR, AR, that kind of stuff.
Oh, I won't talk about that, but I will say one thing. I think that I come from a French-Canadian filmmaking world, which is kind of like this weird little bubble of the film industry in the world. And sorry, I can't focus. Someone's taking a picture. I can't focus. Anyways, that's what happens when you point a camera to a DP. I run away. I literally do. So I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. What was the
The future.
The future, yes. So I have I've always been super involved in everything in pre-production and prep, and even like writing the scripts, because I worked with a lot of people that lived close to me in Montreal, and it's such a small city, everyone knew each other, so I'd be working on projects 2 years before they would, like I know when the director was writing the script. So I'd been very, very involved in the entire process. I think there's a really important place in a film industry that's becoming more and more democratic and more accessible for cinematographers to become above the line and to be producers. I think that we give so much. Like there are a lot of amazing professions in film, but the cinematographer is tends to be one of the most generous positions in terms of giving your life away when you work on these projects. And I feel that being considered below the line, there's a little bit of a detachment. I've definitely felt that I've been in situations where I want to be in those producer meetings and I have something to say that will actually help them and make the film more affordable. And if we're all on the same page and we communicate and we know what's happening, as cinematographers, we can give better ideas in terms of how to produce and how to approach the film in a technical sense. And that approach, like thinking of different ways to approach a scene that would make it more affordable. And sometimes we're a little bit put aside and made not important enough, and I definitely think that is gonna change.
Anybody else want to talk about the future of cinematography?
I think as a general observation, people expect a lot more now for less. So let's say $1 million budget these days, they want like a $10 million look. And 10 years ago, $1 million was $1 million. So I think in our arsenal of skills, we're just getting more and more skills, and we're expected to do more and more, but for the same title.
More with less.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, that's a challenge. What advice would you guys give to people in this room and elsewhere who want to enter your profession? How do you break in? Christopher, why don't you start? No?
I mean, to be perfectly frank, I lied my way in. I worked in the lighting department, and it was the difference between eating or not eating. When someone said, "Hey, have you done a car rig?" I'd say, "Yeah, of course." I'd never done a car rig. But you think on your feet, you figure it out. You call all the people that have done it, and you rely on the people around you and rely on their wealth of knowledge, to help you break through until you are in that place, and then you're helping the poor kid that just said they could do something that they can't.
I kind of always answer questions like this similarly, which is I think there's no real. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication, but the most important thing is you're working with people all the time. You rely on a lot of people. This is not an art form. It's a collaborative art form. It's not one that you're the sole creative force. So I think that the best way, or at least the way I've found, success is by working with really good people and treating them well and doing right by them and vice versa. And then thusly that will come back to you. So it's really important when you're starting out that it can get really easy to get lost in sort of the technical side or the hype or other people or whatever, but I think it's just it takes a lot of work, and find really good people you want to be working with and that you respect, and vice versa, and that will carry you through. And it's really about the company you keep, I think, more than anything.
I just had my 10-year anniversary with my first AC, so I'm really happy about that. And my 5-year anniversary with my DIT. So it really is about relationships and surrounding yourself with people who are really, really good at their jobs, because it will elevate your game.
Film school, no film school, useful, not useful, a little useful?
I have kind of a thought on that. I think that film school is a really good place to kind of distill which part of the industry you have an aptitude for, but I think people will who think it's kind of a training to get into the industry will do so at their peril to some degree. I think whilst not everyone might have, not all DPs they may not have had an extensive background as an assistant. Some people don't. There are some fabulous DPs out there who never assisted. But I think to ignore the wisdom that's out there and available on sets, I think there's a great resource out there, and I learned probably the most not as a second AC or a first AC. I probably learnt the most as a video operator, doing playback, you know, where I sat next to some fabulous people. I certainly learned a lot about putting cameras together and things as a first and second AC, and about the politics on set and all of those things. But sitting next to actors and sitting next to directors by doing video playback was a fabulous. And it's also very humbling when you're a bit cocky when you come out of film school. I think that's kind of important.
Do we have any questions from the audience out there? I'm sure a lot of you have some thoughts about this whole profession and possibly getting into it. And back there?
Mic thing. Okay. I feel like every time you mess up on set, because you're gonna, that scene haunts you. Like, it's like film. You know, you'll be in the grade and it will always be the scene that you go back to and you'll go, "Ugh." Like, I don't think grading has ever fixed anything. Like, it'll make things a little better, but when you really have somewhere where you made a mistake, like you put too much fill light, I can't say that I've ever been saved by it.
Anybody else?
I wish Messerschmitt was here, because they, you know, working on Mindhunter, they do a lot of like, they do a ton of, every shot in that show is stabilized digitally in post. Fincher loves doing like split takes, you know what I mean? He like, if there's two characters in the scene, he likes take one from that person and take, you know, 7 from that person, and he'll just splice it down the middle. So I think that's a situation like where post, you know, can be more influential in creating the image and that kind of thing. I mean, for what I do, not really. I really try and get it. Yeah, I mean, like you said, like if you made a wrong calculation on set, really, it's not gonna get better, but it's not gonna get magically fixed.
Any others?
Meditation.
I think studying other art forms is very helpful to me. I take a lot of still photography, going to museums, you know, seeing, kind of getting away from film, I find to be very helpful for my filmmaking.
I agree. Travel, you know, study light, just kind of be present. And, you know, I agree with Eric, you know, I find film is obviously a huge passion of mine, but I have many others, and I find that sometimes that's more informative or helpful, or even if it's just from a resetting perspective, it's a stressful job at times, and having passion in other places is also nice. But yeah, if you really want to be a cinematographer, I think kind of loving and studying light is sort of a common thread probably with every one of us up here.
To me, it's also about analyzing my emotions every day, and
You need to put the mic.
it's on. Test. Yeah. So to me, it's about being aware of why I feel what I feel in my daily life, and analyzing that, and just by seeing objects and and analyzing the light or the colors and seeing how they affect me, and then trying to put that in my in the way I do films. Then so I look at myself as someone looking at something at movie, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really had one particular mentor, but I mean, the nice thing about film and cinematographers is that we're all extraordinarily passionate about it. And if you, I mean, we love talking about it, as we are. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, generally, if you shoot somebody an email with an interesting question, I mean, they're going to answer, and they're going to enjoy answering. So, yeah, I mean, I'll send people I've never met emails and be like, hey, I saw this movie, it looked amazing, tell me about that thing. You know, and more often than not, they're more than happy to respond and be like, oh yeah, thank you for noticing. This is what I was thinking, this is what we did, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And it's, people are generally pretty open about it.
I'm actually a mentor for HBO, and I have a lot of mentees as well. So we do love sharing our knowledge.
Okay, folks, time's up. That's it. Say thanks to our cinematographers.
All right, everybody, we're going to be switching over to our next conversation. Just give us a second.
Stephen Gatos, executive editor of Variety.
One working. No, yes, sort of. Not really. Yeah. I'm going deaf. That's the bad news. Lawrence, could you come up and we'll get started? We don't want to lose our crowd. Don't want to lose the light. Don't lose the light. No. Okay, well this is this really working? Do you really hear this? No.
Testing.
Testing. There's some magic person somewhere that is doing this. Well, this is fun. We got a chance to start talking earlier, and I was thinking about this when I was reading Variety. The first thing that came to mind was imagining this through the eyes of Lawrence, who comes here after a career in a number of years with a lot of big films and success. But once upon a time, you were an emerging cinematographer, and you were starting out, and you were not a household word, and your films had not grossed billions of dollars and all of that stuff. Seeing the young crowd and seeing the emerging cinematographers, the tend to watch thing is kind of interesting, because like when we do this with screenwriters, I look at them and having been a screenwriter, I think, oh, these guys are all millionaires already, and they're called tend to watch. Our DPs, are making, really terrific movies and getting acclaim all over the world. So it's not like they're students just coming out of the muck. They're very established, but still, there's that beginning of your career when you're trying to prove that you've got something special and get in the hands of somebody really major and important. Going back to that part of your career, what do you think assisted you the most and kind of helped you get up the ladder a little bit and get to a point where people knew your name?
Luck, because a big part of it, frankly, is getting things shot that people have seen, right? It's like everyone's shooting. I shot young. I shot everything I could. But frankly, I always said like the first stepping stone was a film that when my parents said, my son's a DP, he shot this and that, they at least understood the title. Like even if they hadn't seen it, they're like, oh yeah, I heard about that. And then it was like a legitimacy. And then another film. So a little bit is just, frankly, work begets work. Successful work begets more work, sometimes in the same genre. And so unfortunately, it's like to some extent, it's a little bit of like the relationships you form with directors and maybe a film that's sort of broken out and given you some profile.
And those filmmaker, director, DP relationships, looking at your own career and looking at others, because there are folks we've had on Tend to Watch who formed a partnership almost like in some cases in film school with the director, and then that director becomes Darren Aronofsky. You started with
Maddie Libatique.
They've been together a long time. Since film school. Well, good example. You've been working with Todd Phillips a long time, not that long.
10 years, basically.
10 years.
This year, yeah.
Was there someone earlier in your career, because you were doing shorts in the 90s, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the old guy award, as my wife said. But I think Todd, obviously, I've had the longest relationship in terms of 6 films.
Yeah.
Joker's our 6th film together. I mean, at every stage, there's somebody who gave a break.
Was there a director early on that you would say you learned from, or who was it that you would say you learned the most from early on?
I mean, Zach Braff, maybe on Garden State, just because he was acting in it. And so as a cinematographer working on a film in which the director is also the star and in every single scene, I think I learned the most because it put me in a position to have to carry a decent amount of the load, as well as a lot of opportunity to be really creative. It was very personal. I grew up in New Jersey. Yeah. I lived on my aunt's couch in the basement while we made that film, working as a local.
He should direct more films, because that was, straight out of the gate, a terrific film that really holds up.
Yeah, it was a great experience. And we made another film called Wish I Was Here 7 years ago or something like that, yeah. It's also a good experience.
One of the advantages of having a lot of experience is that when you are young, you sometimes are afraid to ask really stupid questions. And you can see I'm not young, and you will now hear that I'm not afraid of asking a really stupid question. But I have not stopped thinking of this question since I knew that you and I were going to talk. I find it so fascinating that you are making films like Godzilla and the Joker coming up, which are rich in CGI and effects and stuff. But you really made your bones, and you really have this string of comedies that are so, they're not just big hits, they're cultural touchstones. So, directing comedy, that makes sense to me. Shooting comedy, help me out. What do you think enabled you, helped you develop this relationship with Todd, helped in working with Zach? Shooting comedy, is there anything special about that as a DP that you feel you were more inclined, or you had more attributes that were organic and natural, or is it just shooting is shooting?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think for me, aesthetically, as I approached comedies, when I think there was I shot 2 back-to-back movies 10 years ago. I did this movie, I Love You Man, which was very successful, really funny comedy, John Hamburg, awesome. And then right after that, The Hangover. And I actually learned so much from what I did on I Love You Man, and then approached things actually almost fundamentally differently on Hangover from an aesthetic standpoint. And I can speak to that a little bit. As far as what tools I had, I think that allowed me to help Todd and maybe some other comedies and it's a tool that all cinematographers have to have. I think Jessica spoke to it, of course, as all the people up there did. And they spoke to things that all felt extremely familiar to me 20 years ago as today. Is to be able to provide a freedom for the actors to work swiftly, keep the momentum going.
Be fast.
Yeah, it's not just being fast, which is obviously everybody has to be fast, but allowing the momentum. The worst thing is when an actor goes back to a trailer because they have 20 minutes. It's really 45 minutes because to get them back, and it's just a momentum killer.
Yeah.
So if you can provide an opportunity to keep everyone close, and you're so quick that they just can roll right into it, I think it allows things to just have a really flow. The day flows really nicely, and the actors, I think, feel a different set of freedom to perform that isn't mired in technological sort of slowdowns.
Again, imagining that Todd has some magic mojo with performances and comedy and writing. How do you assist the mojo? How do you advance the mojo? How do you express the mojo?
By taking as much off his plate as possible, right? So during prep, we go through every scene in a page turn, sometimes in a very rudimentary sense, sometimes a little more specifically, but often it's just to collectively decide emotionally what this scene wants to be about. I've worked with many, many writers who are also directors, and I've always said as I approach the first meeting I have with a director or all through pre-production is they don't need to know a single thing about camera. They don't need to know anything about where to put the camera, lens choices, technological choices. That's not necessarily their job. All they need to know is what is important about the scene, what they want to convey, and then it's one of my jobs is to help interpret that. So for me, one of the most important things for me as a cinematographer is how much of that can I take off the plate. So between me and the AD, we can basically just jam everything he or she wants to get throughout that day, so that his only focus can be on the actors. And if I can do that, then we're both happy, you know, because I like actually driving it too. So.
There was a fantastic article in New Yorker a few years ago that sort of explained there's film comedy pre-Judd Apatow and post-Judd Apatow. And post-Judd Apatow is a whole lot of improv. It's not necessarily the old setup, joke, punchline, payoff, and you shoot a lot of stuff that you don't use because there's a framework for a script, but Will Ferrell is going way off, and everybody's going way off, and you find the magic. Where does Todd Phillips fit into those two different paradigms?
He's not an improv guy. He's actually very different in that regard. He's a guy that won't shoot a frame until the scene works. So he's a guy in which we spend sometimes a lot of time, right, hours sometimes, just in conversations with the actors. And
you're participating in that.
Yeah, I'm sitting around, and often that's when I'll circle the space and jot down notes of how I think. I'll sort of figure out where the best master will be from. I'll witness it and just sort of sit back and circle around. But if all those little things from The Hangover aren't like Judd will often do runs where he just says run and try 50 things and we'll use one in the cut. If Zach comes up with something like, is this pager friendly or something from The Hangover, or did the real Caesar live here, that kind of stuff, that was created through the process of like rehearsing, and he may have one thing that he might change from take to take, but we never do those long improv runs. It's not really improvisational, it's actually quite worked out.
Is it fair to assume that if you did not have some antenna for comedy and some sensitivity and humor in yourself too, because when you're talking about making the notes, you're making the notes from your own perception of how this thing's going to erupt and make people laugh.
Yeah, not just make people laugh, because I always believe like the best way to make people laugh is to keep it feeling as real as possible, frankly. I've always subscribed to a principle that, and same thing aesthetically, it's like if you just make it cinematic and it feels authentic, every movie deserves to be cinematic, even a comedy. I've always believed that. The comedy will come out of that. As long as you don't step on it by trying to be funny, you'll probably allow the comedy to feel really genuine and real, and even funnier.
And naturalism then is the key to the...
Yeah, and just letting it feel like you're actually witnessing real people. Like, and if you're shooting a naked guy jumping out of a trunk and hitting people over with a crowbar, then just make it feel like it's like, what would this be if this was real, and how would I shoot it like a movie first and foremost, not what's technically like the funniest shot per se, you know?
You know, we talk a lot about film literacy and how fast things change. Has anybody here seen the Hangover movies? Okay, that's good. Okay.
Well, that's true. 10 years, right? It's a whole, like half a generation, yeah.
Because, you know, when I was in film school, you know, we'd say, has anybody here seen Grand Illusion? Which, you know, was whatever, so. You should see Grand Illusion too. It's not as funny as The Hangover, but it's worth seeing. Going back to I Love You, Man, and what you learned that you then say you changed course a little bit to work with Todd. Tell us what that sequence was from picture to picture for you.
Well, I think it was a studio film, and I thought,
Was it Paul Rudd, or who was the star?
Paul Rudd and Jason Segel, and John Hamburg directed it. And it really works. I think the movie's hilarious. But I think I had a little bit of a conception in my mind of what a studio comedy was supposed to be, and so I changed some things that weren't really me. You know, things that sometimes like, you know, one of the hardest things to shoot as a cinematographer is just the exterior. Because if you shoot a scene that's 2 pages and you have 12 hours to shoot that scene, it's awfully hard. And if you have 2 hours to shoot it, you can make it really beautiful. I think I read something about you doing these really dusk things with Timur that like is exactly right. We shoot at the right time. It might be really hard, but man, it's gonna look right. And if you shoot it over the whole day, then what are you gonna do? Suddenly I started doing things that I thought you were supposed to do, like covering up the sun and controlling all the light. And suddenly it's just like, it feels like a movie, all right? And I'm like—
Less naturalistic.
Yeah, it's like, this is what movies feel like. And I'm like, I want it to feel like real life. And so when I came to The Hangover, I was like, never, we're never gonna put anything. We're gonna shoot in the sunlight. I'll try to convince Todd to block, to chase the light. But I also convinced him, let's shoot, if we're gonna shoot this location, let's shoot over 2 afternoons instead of 1 day.
Yeah.
And he, of course, because Todd's great about that, he would agree to it. And then suddenly it made first of all, it made it easier to shoot, better. And so all the parties, if they're in on board, it may seem antithetical to like some practices of filmmaking that have been set up, but some of those practices, frankly, are inefficient. And economically, they don't necessarily make as much sense. But there are other factors too, actor schedules.
They're
and stuff like
established by just tradition,
tradition,
studio filmmaking.
tradition. Yeah, and that same tradition applied to studio comedies, and they were just things I didn't necessarily like. So I just didn't. I decided, well, okay, I don't have to do that.
Right.
Then I might not be the right guy, you know, to shoot somebody's comedy because they're a little bit. Somebody I think once said like, yeah, his movies are a bit dirty. And I'm like, all right, but I like it. And so that maybe I'm not right to shoot that Adam Sandler movie or something. Not the good ones, but you know.
Well, talking about Adam Sandler or Todd or Judd Apatow, I mean, if you do a history of modern American comedies, Hangover, the first Hangover, is one of those seismic shocks and shifts and changes of the game. And, you know, Todd he did Old School, right?
Yeah, and I love that movie.
It was a hit. It was a hit. But it wasn't a seismic hit, and it wasn't a culture-changing hit. It was just a big hit comedy that was very funny, where Hangover kind of changed the rules of everything. Did you meet Todd for the first time just before working on Hangover?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we met via another mutual friend that I did a film that he directed in Chicago. He knew Todd. He was making his first film. He's a great writer named Steve Conrad. He was making his first film, and strangely enough, they sort of like, it was a Dimension film, and Bob Weinstein sort of forced Todd to be like a producer, I think out of like protection for the film. But Todd was like, I'm not gonna do anything. Like, you'll never see me. Just go make your movie.
I'm gonna be the worst producer of all time.
I'm gonna be your best producer because I'm never gonna show up, and I'm just gonna, if he needs me on the name. So I think that was a little bit of the relationship, and he recommended me to Todd, and thankfully his regular DP turned it down.
And so now we have this incredibly successful run leading into Joker, which you wrapped shooting on a few months ago. When you first met Todd, what is that beginning? Where does the chemistry? Where do you both kind of go? I think that we're going to have fun with this.
I mean, I always say like I have a bit of a relationship like you would with a lover with every director I've worked with. I mean, it's just natural. And so to some extent, you're looking for that same experience that you have when you fall in love.
It's a first date.
Yeah, and like with Todd, there was something that felt very familiar. Like, I don't know if I've ever said this, but I grew up in New Jersey, and I obsessively listened to Howard Stern on the phone, on the radio. So I would literally race home from and go to the radio and listen to Howard when he was on in New York and New Jersey. And Todd's has a Howard Stern kind of vibe. And I remember right after we first met, we were driving to like another place to continue the meeting, and he turned on the radio and Howard Stern was on, and I was like, yeah, this is a thing. It's like I know this guy because I know Howard, and in all the ways that Howard's great.
There's the connective
tissue. There was just something very familiar, and it just felt like it was something in which we could get along beyond, okay, you know, aesthetically and artistically we were on the same page, but more like where you could get in an argument like the way you do with family, where you're like argument's not going to be the end of it. Like that kind of relationship where you can openly argue and fight and have those that's a good working relationship for me.
And the core of the humor is all three of you are you and Howard and Todd are all completely wrong, and that's okay.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah,
it's right to be
but
wrong.
we're right. But we think we're right. Yeah, exactly. Right. That kind of thing.
I know that if you tell us anything about the Joker that you're not supposed to tell, there is a car parked outside with three guys with guns who will shoot you. So what can you tell us? Because there are things that have come out. If everyone is aware, Joaquin Phoenix is playing the Joker. I think it says on IMDb he was the character is reimagined as a failed stand-up.
Yeah. I mean, the internet's a wonderful place for conspiracies, but also sometimes they get it right. I actually saw somebody took the Joker trailer and then basically tried to figure out what the movie's about, and I was like, man, this guy's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. So some of it's just watch the trailer. Yeah, I mean, it takes place in Gotham. It takes place in the Batman universe, but it's not a superhero movie per se, and it's a character study of a lost man.
And the period has been discussed. Well,
it's
see
like
it in the
it's like
trailer.
80s city Gotham. It's we shot in New York and Newark, New Jersey.
Well, one thing maybe we can talk about, because it's very specific to you and Todd, you made these laugh out loud comedies that were naturalistic comedies, and now you're making a movie set in an sort of imaginary universe with a sort of imaginary character. Has anything changed in in you watching this and making this film? Is there a different tonal approach or something different between the way you guys are working, or is it just another Todd Phillips movie for you?
A little bit of both, in so much as we definitely set out to just try a visual language that was different, but then like every movie is also it's a living, breathing thing, and I think movies change as you make them, and particularly when you're open to the sort of first of all, every movie changes the minute the actor steps on set, right? All your ideas go out the window because the actor is going to drive so much of the emotional storytelling, and so that fundamentally will change things. Now, I think we stuck to our plan as far as trying to just go with a little bit of a different visual language, but if you really looked at our evolution, even from Hangover on, we still use some of the same things, and we still I think we pushed ourselves really hard, but we still do a lot of handheld at times, and we still do small dolly moves and little things that if you watch other movies we've done, you'll see them. You maybe just don't see them in I think we really went for just a little more of a specific visual language on this, which I was excited about.
Since you're a film buff and you don't live in a cave and avoid movies, you've seen Joaquin Phoenix performances before. What surprised you the most about working with Joaquin?
Yeah, I mean, I remember recalling very early on, I think maybe after the first or second day, that it's as if I've never actually seen somebody act before. Wow. Like I went, this is so fundamentally different than and I also operate, and so watching him perform, he was so present that it was almost scary, and it was it was exciting every single take because you actually just didn't know what little choices were going to be made, and it's funny because you also see its effect on every other actor that's in the scene. It's
recalibrating every take. He's somewhat
recalibrating.
recalibrating.
And sometimes manipulating and like doing these things in ways that are just amazing.
Fantastic. And then I said I had one stupid question. I actually have two stupid questions. The other one is just the world of Godzilla and making those kinds of films as a DP. I can't think of anything more different than what you described, where you see a bunch of actors in a room who are going to do a scene, and it's comedic, and like you said, it has to be naturalistic, it has to be the story, you have to believe it. all that stuff, and then it has to make you laugh. But it's all based upon writing and performance. Godzilla is made in a very different way. Did you have any trepidation about stepping into making films that are computer CGI, you know, working in a very different style?
I mean, I had some. I knew there would be some challenges, but I fought for that movie. I wanted to shoot that movie. I think one of the things
what drew you to it?
I had worked on some pretty extensive reshoots on the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, and I enjoyed being in a, like, first of all, just from somebody who tells stories mostly about people standing in real spaces and actors just like saying things out loud. It was challenging. I just liked that it was fundamentally different. I mean, not like actors getting typecast. It's just the nature of, like, you know, it works worse in commercial world. It's like, but have you shot a BMW commercial in snow? Okay, no, we need the guy who's done both the BMW and the snow. It's like, you get typecast. And I think I was like, I love shooting all kinds of things. And so I asked my agents, I was like, I just want to shoot this movie. And so I sort of like, just like jam myself in the room. Said, meet me.
And you wanted it for your purposes. What did they see in you that you think got you the gig?
Enthusiasm. Yeah. Enthusiasm is a pretty big thing.
I couldn't agree more.
I think, like, and I've directed myself, and I think I had a producer tell me, Todd's producer of a long time, Dan Goldberg, he said, you'll know this when you direct. He said, every director feels super, super lonely. They're being peppered with thousands of questions a day. And I always say, like, filmmaking is a benevolent monarchy, right? It's like there's parliament, and, you know, maybe the DP is like the prime minister. It's like we all make recommendations, but there needs to be, and I'm a firm believer that there at the end of the day, there needs to be somebody, because you can make 1,000 different decisions. So there needs to be somebody who eventually says, that's where we're going to go, right? Are we shooting film or video or digital? Somebody's going to have to make that decision, and it should be the director. Yeah. And that can feel really lonely. And so I think what they want more than anything, and I saw this firsthand, is you want another person who cares as deeply about the movie as you do. And I do, to, like, the detriment of my family and, like, personal relationships. Sure. And they say you're not really a DP until you're divorced. I'm divorced. But
that must be so depressing to hear
so
when
depressing.
You're 20 years old.
They go, you're not a DP really until you are divorced and you've been fired. And I'm like, all right, I've been fired and divorced. And now this award. Maybe that's why it came.
So it's enthusiasm and also resilience.
Resilience. But the enthusiasm isn't false. It's like genuine. You want somebody who just cares and feels as only for the genuine just support. And I think whether it's like, you know, however it manifests itself on a set, I care deeply about every movie I make, and every single day. And I always like go, tomorrow will be better. Yeah. Like, and even if today was great, I always like, tomorrow can be better. Let's keep, you know, every day is like a new opportunity to make some beautiful moments. Yeah. Right.
Well, on that note, I want to open up to some questions, but I think you make a really great point when we're talking to an audience of primarily students. How many students are here? That's almost everybody. Good.
Nice.
No, I think that point about enthusiasm is super, super critical, because if you don't care, you really should be in some other business where you don't have to care.
That's right.
And I guess there are places where you can make a lot of money and not care.
Right.
Although I'm not sure that's true. I just know that in the entertainment business, whether it's writing or directing or cinematography or any of the creative arts, you have to be passionate and you have to be resilient. You got to get ready for somebody to slap you across the face and go, you suck, and you go, not really, I don't, but okay, I'll try it again.
Well, yeah, and also be resilient to, like, fight for your idea, and then when they say, nope, we're going to go another way, you're like, great, all right, moving on, and not hold on to, like, the two worst things that can be said on set is, one, that stupid circus theme that you hear, like, somebody, like, you know, is sitting behind while you're, like, struggling to set up a shot, and you're like, bro, it's hard, and, like, it's not a circus. I'm trying to, like, figure this out. But that's, like, a pet peeve. But the second thing is something
as a cinematographer, you don't want to ever say, which is like, hey, it's your movie, right? Like that attitude of like,
That's very
listen,
interesting, yeah.
your movie, your funeral.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, no.
Yeah.
That's
We're in
their
this together,
decision.
and-
Yeah, and we're still in this together, even if my idea was sort of,
Yeah.
even if now I'm being forced to shoot in front light.
Snits
all right.
should happen privately, right? If you have a snit about not having
And
ideas,
listen,
just
movies
suffer
are
in your
like a
trailer.
public place. They don't always go private.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Let's open up some questions right here in the front row.
yes.
Is working? Yes. Okay, just make sure. What's the main, since you shot on film and digital, what do you think is the main difference between film and digital?
Contrast. No, I say that only because I, similar to what Jessica said, had to somewhat convince Todd, and I convinced him a little bit on War Dogs to shoot. We only shot film. I've shot 30 features on film, and in the last 5 or 6 years, I've come to sort of really see the benefits of digital, and we were set out to make Joker in spite of everything, and Todd, and was like, we're not doing that. We're shooting film. Damn, we're shooting film. We shot Area 65. But so we came to that, and it's like, and the panel was actually really brilliant about all the issues they talked about are exactly the same issues as with me, right? Some are. I knew how ultimately we wanted to make Joker, and it wasn't an issue on Godzilla, let's say. The 2014 was shot digital. Mike Doherty, the director, wanted to shoot that. But on a decision where it's like actually somebody wants to do something, or there's a decision to be made, I should say, we tested a lot. And we actually were going to shoot film until like the 11th hour. And I started just figuring that the way we were going to shoot the film was going to be more beneficial if we shot digital. And I also knew that, and the tests were great because we were able to actually create like an EXR 93 lookup table at Company 3 that was so much like film that I think it helped us get partially there. Even with that said, I always say, like, look at, when they play the 10 Oscar nominations from like last year, and you can see which ones are shot on film. Sometimes it tricks me. I thought Beautiful Boy was shot on film, and then I learned it wasn't. But when you see The Favorite or Vice, or there's a third one I'm missing, there's a fundamental difference. And I think for me, besides grain, which we can add and all that stuff, is a textural, there's a contrast. There's an inherent contrast, which is obviously like an S curve that we try to mimic in the digital world. That's ultimately the difference. But I've come around to believe that the fundamental things, speed, ASA, like shooting high frame rates. There's so many unbelievable things to what the new digital technologies can bring. I think it makes our job so much more creative, and it allows for a creativity that I just have come to really appreciate. So that's the difference.
How about somewhere else rather than the front row? There's a gentleman over there, I think.
With 360 video becoming more and more accessible, do you ever see it having any applications in the feature film world, or do you think that's more of like a commercial video thing?
Are you saying VR, like 360?
Yeah, like VR 360 video.
I'm still it's weird. It's like 3D to me. I feel like they've been telling us it's the thing for years now, and like the public keeps going, yeah, but like I don't have an Oculus. I should have an Oculus if it's the thing already, right? We should all have. We'd be wearing Oculus right now instead of listening to me. I'm still super intrigued about it, and it's like I also find like I haven't experienced the thing yet. I think about it, and I believe there's something there, but I haven't seen it yet. I think somebody will do it. Somebody will do it, and it'll break the mold. It'll like do that thing that then takes it to the next level. I just haven't seen it yet. Inherent to filmmaking and the language of film is the director and the editor, the whole process, pointing you into what you're supposed to see, whether it's wide, close, whatever it is.
And the inherent nature of VR is the opposite. So you have the option to look where you want to see. So it's a fundamentally different kind of storytelling. Somebody will beat it. Probably
Sort of
somebody
not
in
there
this
yet.
room.
Well,
Yeah.
no pressure, but we only have time for one more question, so it's got to be a great one. Yes, thank you.
Oh, all right. That's all right. That's all right. My eyes was already there.
Can you tell us a little bit about going from like a kid with a camera to the position you are in today? Like how your journey as a filmmaker?
Shoot. First and foremost, just shoot, right? I did assist for a little while, mostly on commercials and music videos, but I sort of chose every job I felt like was an opportunity to earn enough money to pay my rent that month, and then I spent the rest of the month trying to shoot something, right? And it's like, and that's not because assisting or those things those are amazing. But if you really want to shoot or direct or whatever you do, work your way towards that, because at some point, if you're an assistant, and you start working your way up and becoming a bigger an assistant, it's like amazing money. And that might handcuff you and keep you harder to break away, right? Like, I had to stop assisting or doing anything not related to shooting, and it was pretty late. Like, I was 30, I had a kid. No, I was 30 and I was married, I didn't have a kid yet, but I was like an adult, and I made $7,000 that year. So it's like, that's a tough adult year at 30, and like, you feel like, wow. And it was the year I decided to not take any assisting jobs. And I did this movie called Kissing Jessica Stein, which was like that movie my mom at least had heard of. So it coordinated with the end of that year.
I think actually, who's the director?
Charlie Wormfeld.
Yeah. I think it actually may have been one of our Variety 10 to watch that year.
Oh, yeah, probably, yeah.
Now, was there another question over here?
Yeah,
just
in the back. Yeah,
in the
yeah.
back?
Yes.
One more. I hate to break promises.
In a film like Garden State, where the storytelling is so simple, how do you make sure that cinematography is part of the way you tell that story?
Nice question.
That is a good question. And first and foremost, generally, the director is going to dictate a lot, right? Because it's like a director is either going to be committed to, they're going to have a certain level of commitment. Some are really visual directors. I don't work necessarily with as many of those like visual first directors. I work with like writer and directors and storyteller directors sort of first. So I think you have to find that way to feel out first and foremost how important visuals are. And sometimes it's not going to be important, right? Like, sometimes it's about capturing some moment that's authentic and real, and your job as a cinematographer, and that may be the best visual example of, that's the best thing you could do for that scene. So it's not about creating some elegantly lit, master, beautiful, something that's gonna end up in visions of light, but you're doing your job in the best possible way because so it really depends. I think everything drives down from the director. And hopefully the relationship you have with your directors will allow you for them to see that your job and the visual part of the storytelling is as important. And if it's not a director that's like already on board with that, you know? And there are directors that are too on board with the visuals, right? We've seen that, like these amazingly beautiful things that don't engage you at all, right? So I think Call Me By Your Name is like a beautifully, almost perfectly shot film. It's like one lens, and it has almost no like showy camera work, you know?
It was the right work.
It was the right work, and I cried.
Well, everybody go do the right work, and thank you for coming and being part of this today.